Hi there, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another edition of the Phoenix Phenomenon. My name is Roxanne McCarty-O'Kane. I'm your host. And today I have with me Rachel Pope, who is an incredible author and ambassador for people who are going through grief. Her book, Gifts from Grief, was released last year and includes quite a lot of lessons that she has learnt overcoming a lot of grief in her lifetime. So Rachel will be able to share a lot more of that with you herself. Just to give you a rundown, she lost her father at the age of 17 to bowel cancer. In the year 2000, her brother passed away after a car accident. And 12 years later, 2012, her husband and the father of her children died from bowel cancer also. And at the same age, I believe, as well as when the disease claimed her father. So she's had more than an unfair share of grief to deal with in her life. And she has channeled that into this incredible book that is now going on to change lives, really, and help other people who are going through grief to feel that they're not alone, to feel connected, and to give them some real life guidance. So that was really long-winded. Thank you for hanging in there with me, Rachel.
It's quite a mouthful of a story, isn't it? You know, when you're speaking and everything, and you have to get used to telling that story over and over again. No two deliveries are the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. I have no doubt you have so much to share with our listeners and watchers today. So I really appreciate your time coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's an honour and a pleasure. Thanks.
Not a worry at all. So I'd love for you to share more about the journey that you've been on to create this book that is, you know, it's something tangible. It's something that's already connecting so many people who would otherwise feel quite alone in dealing with their grief and processing all of the emotions that go with that. So I'd love to know more about your journey and what it was that inspired you to create this book, this Gifts of Grief book.
Yeah, well, you shared my story there, so it wasn't really until I came full circle with the loss of my husband in 2012. I was 38, and as you said, it was at the same age and the same cancer as my dad when I was 17. So that just all of a sudden brought up all that grief and emotion as well, that I wasn't only dealing with the loss of my husband, but all of a sudden I realised I hadn't really dealt with the grief of my dad and my brother all those years ago. When you're 17 and you've got the whole world at your feet, you're not equipped to deal with things like that. Everyone's starting out. I had just finished high school. I was studying to be a pilot. I got my restricted pilot's license and enrolled into uni. And it's meant to be the most exciting time of your life. So he actually passed away 6 weeks after diagnosis, so it was very sudden as well.
Wow. Yeah.
So when my husband was diagnosed with the same, what do you think my automatic thought was? Oh my gosh, he's going to be gone in 6 weeks' time, because that was my previous experience 25 years ago. So we had a longer road of treatment than my dad, almost 16 months with my husband. And when he passed, it just brought up a whole lot of emotion for my brother and my dad. And I realised I hadn't grieved properly. I hadn't sought any kind of counselling or, read many books. So the start of it was actually going and looking for some resources for myself. And I couldn't find anything that, there's a lot of clinical books out there on grief and the 5 stages or the 9 stages and all these things you're meant to go through. And I couldn't relate to any of it because I was feeling different to what they had said I was meant to be feeling. And then also just from other people's experience and reading things that, they tell you how you're meant to feel 12 months later, 2 years later, 3 years later. So it was 3 years later that I started journaling and just writing my thoughts down myself. Created a community online on Instagram at first called Gifts from Grief. And, there was a whole heap of fear and vulnerability about that, about sharing stuff and whether I was what I was saying, would help anyone or make any sense. And so I held it private for quite some time, and had the courage to hit publish in January of last year. And as soon as I started getting feedback from that, messages, direct messages saying, oh my gosh, I can relate to that, and oh yes, you've helped me, and this is so refreshing, and yes, and yes, and yes, and you just get that encouragement that your message means something. So I entertained the idea of putting it into a book, and that community has grown to over 8,500 people now all around the world. And what I have found is that grief is something that's not talked about. And so my main purpose for writing the book was to lift the lid on those conversations around grief. And I found it somewhat of a culture thing here too in Australia, that there was a lot more support groups, a lot more conversations and pages and private groups in the US. And not here. So, I entrusted a book coach, someone similar to yourself, who helped you put all your ideas in order and on paper, and it actually turned out to be something completely different than what I had started.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Tell me about the evolution that you went through. What was it that you initially had in mind?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd initially just be telling my story, and so when I went looking for those books, instead I picked up a lot of autobiographies and people that I admire, and people who have overcome, and like Turia Pitt, and I found a lot more inspiration from those type stories rather than just a book about grief. So I thought that I'd be weaving my stories around, and the how that I had risen above and come out the other end. But when we started writing my structure, I was talking all these positive gifts and things that if it wasn't for what I had been through, I would not now have within me. And so the top 3 chapters are the gift of gratitude, the gift of growth, and the gift of perspective. And that's what I speak about a lot, because unless you've experienced it, unless you've have been given that perspective through loss, it's hard for people to grasp and understand. And I would love for people to have that understanding and have that ability to gain some perspective on their current life before it happens to them. So that can be a lesson for everyone, not just people in grief. The things that we think matter the most actually don't matter at all, and it's the little things that matter. And it's not until we have that hindsight and perspective through which is what growth is, isn't it? So so we ended up coming up with another 12 in total, 12 gifts that I believe is something that I've learnt to develop, but I've also, once you've gone through the growth and the perspective and are empowered with gratitude daily, then all these other gifts become apparent, like contribution and giving back and compassion and the gift of adventure and spontaneity. So it took a while. It took a while to get through, and of course my story is woven all through that to help people relate. I thought it was just going to be directed at widows, but because I had lost my father and my brother as well, I've had so much feedback from people who've been through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a brave step to set out on a book writing and journey, especially when you're giving so much of yourself. Like, I know that can be quite a tough process for people, because you're going back to recalling what was happening, hearing about your loved ones passing, and then recalling the feelings that you were going through when you were dealing with that. And so what was that journey like for you? Was it a very emotional one?
It was a roller coaster. There'd be times where I'd write for 3 weeks straight, and then times where I had to put it aside for a good 3 weeks. So it took longer than expected, and she was so patient with me because of that reason, and knowing that I couldn't sugarcoat it, and knowing that even though I'm I'm seen as a very positive and grateful person now. I had to take myself back to when I didn't see all of that, and the dark days and the on your knees days and rock bottom days. And I knew I had to put that down for people who are in that, to give them hope for the other side. So, yeah, it is very difficult to recall, and to write it in a way that is uplifting, at the end of it all, because I didn't want the sympathy and pity of everyone, and you can't compare. Grief comes in many forms, and everyone's story is different, and everyone has something to offer. But I realised that it was, in telling my story, that it was going to help so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking to grief coming in many forms, when you were first reaching out to get some information on your healing journey, were you feeling a little bit jilted that, what you were feeling wasn't marrying up with the clinical, 9 or 12 steps, as you mentioned? Like, how was that for you to work through that when, you're being told you should be feeling this, whereas that it might be completely different what you're experiencing for yourself?
Yeah, and it was coming from, it was just all the feedback that I was getting back from the community that, just reassured me that I was on the right track, that I was, that this was normal. So it wasn't coming from, research and things on that topic of grief. It was more so coming, all the feedback I got from my community saying, yes, I felt that too. And I'm 20 years down the track and I still feel the same, or, and it's the duality of it all, to know that you can have happy, sad moments, because, when you go through all those, when you have children as well, and you're going through those milestones with them, then you're happy and grateful, yes, in the now, but there's also that element of sad and missing of what was. And so we grieve the future as well as the past. We grieve what would have been. And I can remember all my friends' 18th and 21st, having their fathers there telling their speeches and walking them down the aisle for their weddings. And I, looking back now, I was, grieving then, grieving what, wasn't going to be. And I knew that I would never have that. And so I imagine that would be the same for people with child loss, and their friends, kids reaching their milestones and their birthdays, and imagining their child at that age. So, yeah, it was the feedback from all the community to realise that I wasn't alone, that was normal to feel all those things, and that there's no timeline, that there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Well, there is a wrong way, and that is to not grieve at all, as in don't allow it to happen or push it under the carpet. And that's where we need the support and the conversations to open up around it, that it's okay and that we do actually want people to talk about our loved ones. And that's a very healing thing to do for someone, is to say their name. And I always say to people when they reach out, if the best thing to say is, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you, rather than not say anything at all, because acknowledgement is the key to helping a friend or someone who's going through loss. Yeah,
absolutely. And that was a key component of your book too. You actually dedicated an entire chapter to, friends and relatives of people who are going through grief, and giving them some insight into how it is that they can be, more supportive and be there for someone, which it's a really important aspect.
It is. It's the most common message question that I get. And that is, my friend has just lost such and such. What do? I don't know what to do. Shall I give them your book? And until I open up the conversation and find out when and where, and if it was yesterday, and I say no, my book's not for them now. Give them food, give them support, give them practical things. And so I because I was getting so many of those questions, that's when I decided to add that chapter of how to help a friend. And I've had people buy the book, purely for that reason, because they want to know what to do. Yeah. So it addresses immediate grief, in the immediate and also down the track, because that's important to check in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, especially anniversaries, that they're to honour the hard anniversaries, and to just send your friend a little note or a message saying, hey, I'm thinking of you today. It must be hard. Again, like I said, it's in the acknowledgement that makes people feel less alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you found that in your experience too? That have you had that support network for yourself when you were on your grief journey?
Yeah, and it comes and goes in waves, and people, you know, in your life. And of course, I've been really blessed with a lot of family support and friendships, long time friendships that knew my husband and knew my dad and knew my brother. So I'm very lucky in that way. But some people don't have that. Some people have everyone disappear completely and don't have any connection to that life, and they can feel very isolated. So yeah, it's hard in that immediate year, because it's generally after, you know, a couple of months that people have to just get on with their lives, and their loss, even though they knew that person and felt the loss, it's nowhere near as severe or direct impact on their life as it is yours. So it's hard for people to remember that they need to check in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so can you share with our listeners today a bit more about your healing journey? So you mentioned you were looking for resources. Did you connect with some help with dealing with your mental aspects of that side of things? I've lost the word. This is why I'm juggling around my words.
Yeah, just sort of any kind of therapies or things, finding what helps. Yes, definitely. You know, I went down that avenue of just trying to find what works for you, and that's really important in whatever field that might be, and in health and in nutrition and looking after yourself. I write about that in the book about self-care is so important. But the turning point for me was going on an adventure retreat. And that's on the cards for me to hold it. I'm very keen to put that together. People have been asking. So next year, hopefully that's in the cards. But what it did for me was it made me feel alive again. And it made me feel like, hey, I can still honour and do this, but I need to live, and I have my whole life ahead of me, and I need to live and laugh. And so going on that retreat opened up my eyes to just getting out of your comfort zone, I think, is really important. Having huge, big belly laughs with, you know, other women that I didn't know, and just separating myself from my current situation. It was also the longest I'd been away from my kids for a week. So there was a lot of brave in it that, you know, made me feel good and empowered. And I came home from that, and that was the turning point to selling my previous business, in fact, because I owned and ran a franchise. And so I sold that business and just went back into retail part-time just to gather my thoughts, and the book idea stemmed from that. So the healing was in, surrounding yourself with positive, surrounding yourself with good people, surrounding yourself with a bit of adventure, and revisiting things that you love to do, because we often lose that along the way, and things that it's that loss of identity, and just reconnecting with, you know, you may not have swum in the ocean for a year or something like that, or if you do art or craft or something that you just haven't had the energy all the time. And it's important to revisit those things, because those things are what give you personal joy. So yeah, that's part of the healing, and definitely journaling, just letting it all out.
Excellent. So it would have been a big process for you, or a big, as you said, a bravery step for you to go out on an adventure retreat like you did. Tell me about how did you come across the idea, and I guess what sparked that inspiration for you at the time?
I actually won it.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
telling you needed it.
Yeah, with the awesome, incredible Lisa Curry, you know, who's here on the Sunshine Coast, and she holds them every year in Fiji, and with an amazing bunch of ladies from the Fernwood Gym that I'm now part of and know. And so, yeah, it was obviously meant to be. And I've since been on other ones in self-development or with my writing and things like that. But for me in mind, it will, it will involve some kind of adventure, or I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was very lucky.
Yeah, definitely. And so was it an immediate, you mentioned that was kind of a turning point for you to realize what the future held for you. Was it an immediate light bulb moment, or how did that unfold for you? Was it a gradual process of your time being away, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it was all of that, and just coming back feeling so refreshed and invigorated and alive, and just ready to, draw a line in the sand and say, there has to be another way. I can't, keep staying down where I was and struggling and just trying to be strong for my kids, and you do all of that and you put a mask on, and but just, the retreat also involved, talking and writing things down, and goals and dreams and things like that. So it's just revisiting all of those, and being encouraged by people around you that it is something you can do, and then the hardest part is just in the starting, isn't it? It's always in the starting.
Absolutely.
It's okay. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's awesome. And so the mindset shift for you, like you've obviously your book, so the title is Gifts from Grief. So there would have been a mindset shift for you to change from looking at how painful the loss is to then learning the lessons that each of these men have taught you, and what they've given to you throughout their life, and also in their death, the lessons that they've taught you through there. So I'd love for you to share with people a bit about what that journey was like for you, and how that mindset shift came about.
Yeah, well, coming up with the title was part of the journey. There was a lot, going through the domain names and Googling, and there was a lot of, life after loss and living after loss, and how to live again after loss. And it was that I knew that it had to have a positive vibe to it, because gratitude being the number one part of my healing journey was it's okay to be grateful for now and be grateful for your past, and then that makes gratitude also makes sense of your future as well. So I just threw out a lot of names to some close people, or to my friends, and together we came up with the Gifts from Grief, and I wanted the gifts to be first. And yeah, it's funny, I've only really had one or two little question marks over that through social media, saying how could there be gifts in grief, and that it takes some people by surprise. But so yeah, it's a good thing, so it attracts a little bit of attention.
Absolutely.
And it's not until I explain, what it's about, that they can understand. And it is up to you, though, to gradually have that awareness, and that's what it's all about. Is if you have that awareness and open your eyes to all of that, the others will flow to you. But nobody else can do that for you. It is a journey for yourself. And people could be 2 years, 5 years, 7 years behind me on my journey, and that's why I don't expect people to see it or to. But it's my purpose to provide them with hope, for them to at least say, okay, she's living this life now, and that's possible for me.
Absolutely. And so for those who are, further back in their journey, obviously the grief is a lot more raw for them. What would you say, if they're not ready to accept that there are gifts to come from this experience, what would you say would be their first step to, you'd recommend for them to start their healing journey?
I think it is in seeking help and being, brave enough to ask for that help, that they don't have to do it alone, and depending on their lifestyle and things and what would suit them with that. Definitely fitness and moving and getting outside is a number one step. And, for me, I'd have those doona days where I'd just drop the kids at school and come home and hide under the doona all day. But the trick is to not be there again the next day. So it's okay to have those. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to just want to shut yourself from the world, and that's perfectly normal. But the next day you need to step outside. So I'd say to people just to even walk outside into your backyard. It's so easy to stay indoors, and just to walk outside and get fresh air and just sit in the sun for 10 minutes. And the next day that could be around the block, or the next day, going to the beach or something that gives you joy, the mountains, wherever that may be. And you may need to seek a friend to help you do that. You may need somebody, and as a friend, that's where they can step in and help and say, hey, I'm picking you up tomorrow and we're just going to go for a walk along the beach.
Yeah.
And some people have to go straight back to work, so that could be a lot of stress and no time for themselves in that area. So I guess the advice there is to really try and find that time to carve out for yourself, just 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there throughout your week too. And if you have small children as well, it's finding that time where you can just be still and find something that makes you happy to do. Yeah.
Awesome. And are you comfortable sharing with what it was and what it was that brought you joy? You've mentioned getting out in nature. Was it
Yeah, for me it's the ocean. If you visit my Instagram, you'll see that there's a lot of water involved there, and the ocean has always been my happy place. And so part of the process of me moving forward is selling our family home, and I bought a unit at the beach, and that was the best thing I did for the kids and I when they were little. It was 2 or so years on.
Mm-hmm.
That was huge in my healing journey, and so when you lose a spouse, it's part of the growth is that revisiting yourself and your identity as yourself, and just staring at yourself in the mirror, and taking off all those layers of the attachment to that other person. When you're married, you choose things together, you choose where you live together, you choose where you go on holidays, there's all those joint decisions. And when you're left to deal with that on your own, all of a sudden it's that, oh, well, what do I want? Where do I want to live? And what makes me happy, and where do I want to go on holidays? And that's part of the growth is finding that within yourself, to create your own identity and still honouring what you had. So for me, it was I need to be near the water. I just need to be near the ocean, and that just opened up a whole new world for us to get outside and get outdoors and walk everywhere, and have people around, and movement and activity. And so it could be something like that. It could be changing your environment, or some people want to stay in their environment. That's the thing. There's no, it's for whatever is for you. To be strong and stand for that too, because you might get people telling you that it's too soon, you shouldn't be doing that, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. That's some advice for other people is they can't fix them. You can't fix your loved one. You can just be there for them and support them with their decisions. Yeah.
So that's just human nature, isn't it? You're just like, I just want to fix it and make it better. Whereas
that's right, especially if it's someone you love who's hurting, but you need to stand by them while they save themselves.
Oh, beautifully said. Excellent. And you did mention earlier on in our conversation that when you were dealing with the grief of the loss of your husband, you didn't actually realise that there was still a lot of feelings and emotions to process from your dad and from your brother. I was curious to see if you could give us some insight into, I guess, how people can know that they're giving themselves a full opportunity to process a loss and to deal with their grief, rather than perhaps giving it lip service, if I can say that, like just having a cry and moving on. Like, obviously there's a lot more to it than that.
For me, I found it was because I was started to go through photos and write the blogs and the posts, I was starting to celebrate them again, and that was part of the process for me, is because and why I think we don't allow this. You know, in some cultures they have full shrines in their house and photos and candles of their loved ones, and that's normal. In here, and I have found from, it's not something that I've personally experienced, but people with infant loss or you know, stillborn births and things like that, that people find that uncomfortable to have that photo in somebody's house, and it shouldn't be that way. They're still their baby and they're still going to mourn them, and it's not something they can get over, you know. It's so for me, if somebody is feeling that way, I guess it's because they haven't been able to talk about it. They have had, you know, may have lost their dad at a young age, or they may have lost a parent quite some time ago, and people around them don't know that, and they don't know who they are. So yeah, I think it's just allowing those spaces for those conversations to ask somebody, or tell me about your mum. What was she like? You know, where did you grow up, and where was she, and were you close, and things like that, and can you show me some photos? And so yeah, I think that's part of it, is to just allow space for those conversations. And for me, for my dad and my brother, because I realised I hadn't, I went back through all of that, and of course there were tears whenever you go through old photos and things. So there was a release just in that, just, you know, revisiting all the photos, honouring the anniversaries again, telling people about them, honouring their birthdays, you know. So every year now I'll put up a post about them and a little bit about them, the age they would have been this year, things like that. So, and I often will say to people, the best way to honour someone is to be a little bit more of what you loved about them, you know.
That's
so
really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, that's a gift, isn't it? To, you know, say, well, my dad was like this, and to, you know, try and take on one of those positive qualities more in your life, because that was their gift to you.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And so I'd love to find out a bit more about how people can connect with you and connect with Gifts from Grief. Is the Instagram community still very active and going?
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook for Gifts from Grief, and on LinkedIn, it's all Gifts from Grief, all of those pages, and my web is just giftsfromgrief.com. There's quite a few exciting things coming up. I've been invited back to be a guest speaker on the After Chloe and Friends Online Summit in the US. It's a grief summit. It runs for 10 days, and each of the speakers have talk on a different topic. So this is my second year doing that. So all of that will be up on the page, and there's so many resources in that summit for people of all different walks of life. It's really valuable. Just online workshops and in-person workshops all coming up too, so they can see all that on the Facebook page as it comes. I've got a free shipping sale at the moment with my book. So they can jump on Facebook there and see the link to that too within Australia, because I've just had my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday. Excellent. And so how does it feel now to, you know, the book's been out, the book's already making an impact, and with people who are reading it and reaching out to you, how does it feel now to, I guess, have channeled your experience into this whole new purpose and this whole new passion for yourself?
Yeah, it's a big learning curve. You know, I'm still learning the author journey, and but it's the feedback that keeps you going, right? And when you know you've found your purpose, when you're helping people, and my last chapter is the gift of wholehearted living. So if you can find a way that incorporates, you know, we're all born with a purpose and with people in mind, and you know, if you can work and find that as well in one package, then it makes for some wholehearted living. So I'm really celebrating the fact that I've allowed myself the growth, and I'm still growing through it, to be able to speak about it constantly, and to look after myself so that I can keep the energy to do that and be there for people. So, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Rachel. We will pop the links for all of your socials and your website below so that people can easily click through and check you out and connect. If what you've said today has really resonated with some of our listeners, we'd love to link you all together to create this amazing community, make this community even bigger for you. So.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Roxy. And yes, it is important for people to know that they can, be in touch and message me. And if I can't help them, I can certainly put them in touch with people too who can, and different resources. That's really important.
Perfect. All right.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Yeah, no worries. And for all of you watching at home, thank you for joining us again. There will be a few more episodes to come yet of the Phoenix Phenomenon, so make sure you keep tuning in each week as we release those. Won't give you any spoilers this time around. But yes, please like and subscribe the Phoenix Phenomenon so you can keep abreast with all of the amazing people just like Rachel that we are showcasing on the platform. And also reach out to Rachel and let her know if she's really helped you today as well. So thank you again, Rachel. Appreciate your time.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.